So I'm actually from Nashville, born and raised here. So I've seen the growth from early 90s to now. Um, it's definitely changed a lot. Since started working here at the store, I have learned a lot about food insecurity and about just how that has affected different areas of Nashville just over the years. I think it depends. I think there's both good and bad to the growth that we've seen. Obviously, things would be great for the economy, our city's growing, there's more jobs, all that stuff. But with that also comes gentrification, and especially in the neighborhood that we are in right now, the Edgehill community. This area used to not look like what it looks like now, like with the 12th South, all the shops and everything. Like this all was very residential housing and whatnot. And now a lot of people that had lived here for years are being pushed out of these homes that they've lived in forever because now they can't afford it, or people are coming and buying it off from them. And it's also just made the cost of living very expensive for people in this neighborhood. And you can really see like the dichotomy of the two ends of the spectrum, like the very wealthy people versus people in low income housing or struggling situations. Like just down the street is low income housing in DHA, and then if you just cross over Wedgwood, this is all like new builds or people buying out old housing and all that kind of stuff. So in that regard, it's not great because it is pushing people out of their homes, and it's just kind of, just very sad to see. Before we were here, which we're not, open to the public, but there isn't really another grocery store around here. Before we were here, there was a corner store down at the end of Wedgwood and 12th Avenue, and that was, just a corner store, but you could get some basic items there. Eventually that space, actually just this past year, was bought out by Belmont, so that was no longer there for the community to use. So before we were here, and even now, it's a food desert. And I just learned recently the term the food apartheid, because it's not so much as there's just nothing around here to build, it's that businesses are intentionally not building grocery stores here because they want to wait for the value to go up, and then once the more wealthy people move in, then they will build stores here because that's where they're going to get their money from. So it is an intentional thing that they are doing to not have food available to people, especially people in the neighborhood that need it. I know they just recently built the Publix, but that's a couple miles away. So for people who actually live right here in Edgehill, it's a lot harder for them to get to places where they can get food. And many people that do live in Edgehill are low-income housing, so they do qualify for our program. So now that the store is here, we have become a resource for a lot of community members, which has been great to be a part of, but it's also it's a bummer that has to happen, that there aren't other resources for them to be able to use. Yeah, we do have customers that are able to drive here. We serve anyone in Nashville, or just really anyone that's able to come to the store, but a majority of our customers do live in the neighborhood, whether 12th South, Edgehill, or surrounding, areas. And so, a lot of people walking on foot, people taking the bus. Even the bus is hard. There's some barriers to even riding the bus because that costs money, and the bus schedule or the bus system in Nashville isn't the best. We used to have a bus stop right out front, which I think so it's down the street now. They moved that, so now it's made it even harder for a lot of our customers, because when you've got a bunch of bags, having to carry them all the way down the street can be really difficult. Yeah, so we would consider ourselves a program, so that word is totally fine. So we serve all different households. Depending on your household size, we'll kind of dictate how many items you can take. So we do operate just like a normal grocery store. So they can come in, they get a shopping cart, shop for what they need. But if instead of having price tags on things, we have item limits, as that's what we say. So households of 1 to 2 have a certain item limit. There's a bracket from 3 to 5 people, and then a bracket of 6 to 9 people. And so depending on that household size will dictate how many items you can get. Obviously, if you have more people in your house, you need more food. So yeah, like I said, we serve any size household, really. So that's actually right when I started working here. So March 2020, I started part-time, and now I'm doing the role I'm in now. But so they were open for, I believe, 3 or 4 days of normal operations as they were scheduled to. And then quickly, had to pivot. So because of the pandemic, we wanted to limit the amount of people that were coming in and out of the store. So instead of doing in-store shopping, we pivoted to doing curbside pickup and deliveries, which quickly grew very large. I think when we first started doing deliveries, we were delivering to maybe 25 to 50 households, and that was mainly focusing on elderly households because they were, at the beginning of the pandemic, that was what we understood was they are going to be the most affected by this. So that started out with 25 to 50 bags a week, as well as doing curbside pickup for maybe 50 to 100 customers, maybe not even 100, but that quickly grew to almost 500 households a week that we were serving just through delivery. And then on top of that, we were doing curbside pickup. So rather than, customers coming in shop, they would drive up and we would put bags in their car, just pre-made stuff. And then with deliveries, again, obviously that had to be a pre-made bag. So having to pivot that way, which obviously originally our model was to have people to choose their own thing, but we kind of just had to work with what we had in the moment. During that time, we definitely were seeing a lot more elderly customers because they were, again, more affected and couldn't leave their house as easily as other people were able to. A lot of people that were on unemployment, so people that didn't have jobs during that time, or families that were struggling. Versus now, we see more so what we originally intended, the population we originally intended to serve. So low-income households, low-income families, which we had been serving all along too. But now that the economy started back up and people are able to get back to work, we're seeing less people on unemployment. Because before it was, just people who maybe weren't in low-income housing before. They were, stable housing or stable income, and then they lose their job for however period of time. So we don't see that as much. We do still serve elderly population, but nowhere near what we were doing with deliveries, which was, like I said, close to 450, 500 households every week. We do still have a senior shopping program. That's every Thursday morning. They're actually bussed over from local towers. So Wedgwood, Towers, Bernard Studio. So we're still serving elderly folks, but just not on the scope that we were before. So I think I know the numbers fluctuated, but at the end of that programming that we were doing with the curbside and the delivery, I think we were serving over almost 600 households a week. And that was, again, curbside and delivery. Now, which we originally intended to only be serving 100 households a week. So that changed very quickly. And now that we're back to our original model, we're serving close to 350 households. So back to kind of a normal number. So because we were doing pre-made bags, we had more control about how many items were actually going out. So a bag may have only had 25 items in it or 30 items in it for a large household, and they all got the same size bag. Whereas now our larger families, so a household of 6 to 9, they can take up to 50 items. And then in addition, they have options of doing like household or hygiene products, which are separate from their item total. Same with produce. Our produce bags that we were doing for the pre-made bags were substantial enough, but maybe not as much as people would be taking had they been shopping on their own. Definitely had some people being more generous during that time period, so getting more donations. But budget-wise, pretty much stayed the same. I know our budget's gone up a little bit this year, but that was the main way that we were able to serve that many people, is because we did have control on what products were going out and doing the pre-made bags. Whereas now it's a very different setup, I guess.
Sure.
Exactly. That is like the main point of our mission, is to be able to offer this normalized shopping experience where they can shop with dignity. Yeah, I think it's probably a combination of both, but definitely some staples that are like almost every single customer that comes in will get milk, they'll get eggs. So we have to always make sure there's enough eggs for how many households we're serving, because that is an item that almost everyone, if not everyone, will take a carton of eggs, a gallon of milk. We also offer non-dairy milk, so one of the other of those two. Frozen meat, we get that in from Second Harvest, so that is every single customer is allowed to take one meat, and every single customer will take a meat. except for a couple of vegetarian folks that we have in here. So those items that are a bit more expensive at the store, especially like with the eggs, I'm sure you've heard about the past several months and how eggs have gone up in prices due to the avian flu. But even things like pasta or cereal or any kind of grain, those items also fluctuate in price. So with inflation, things are up and down. I know with any grain product, because of the war in Ukraine, those prices went up because Ukraine is the breadbasket of the world. That's where a lot of that was being supplied from. And now that we don't have access to that, we did see some products going up in price there. But yeah, stuff like you said, like canned goods or things that are cheaper that they could get to the store, I think it is just an accessibility issue. And also, if they're able to get those items here, like say they've already gotten the more expensive items like essentials, and they still have items that like they're allowed to get, like you said, if they're at checkout and the volunteers tell them, hey, you're under by 6 items if you want to go get more. Like you said, not everyone does. Some people are very mindful of only taking what they need, but then some customers are like, okay, great, like I didn't realize I was under, I'm going to go grab 6 cans of beans because then that will help hold me over. And canned goods could be expensive too, depending on what you're looking for. You know, some canned goods are 79 cents or whatever, and then some are $2 a can. So it just kind of depends on their dietary needs or how many people are in their house. So yeah, so that was originally the intention, was for them to only be in the program for a year. Once the pandemic hit, we totally nixed that because obviously no one's going to be able to like work towards self-sufficiency if they can't get a job. But we also understand that some people may never get to that point, you know. So right now we just implemented that year programming. We just did our enrollment period back in the fall, so October, November is when we started our programming year. So everyone that was enrolled understanding that they are only here for a year. That was then. Now is different. Because we all know, like, you're not going to build yourself out of poverty in 1 year. You may never build yourself out of poverty, especially in generational poverty, all that kind of stuff. So it's still in the works. We're still talking about it. We are a very relatively new organization, so still kind of working out those kinks. That was the original idea, but I think a lot of the staff members here have expressed that may not be helpful. That was a question we brought up. Are we just turning and burning, trying to serve as many people, or are we actually trying to help people in the long run? So it's still something that we are talking about. Right now it's the year program is implemented, but I think that there have been talks from higher ups that might be something that we can change. Now when it comes to people like elderly folks, we have the program, if you're 75 and older, you're in the program indefinitely, because those are people who aren't working. Their situation will not be changing. Like if you're drawing Social Security, that's going to be the same for the rest of your life, essentially. So yeah, it just depends on how the rest of the year goes. So we would like to be able to serve people for longer, but there are certain things in place, like with our grant and whatnot, that we have to kind of abide by. Yeah, I can't think of anything like specific, but I would say that it is a community effort. So it's not just, okay, you do this and we're doing this. I think we all work together. So we work in partnership with other organizations like Community Resource Center. That is another place they provide hygiene items. So we work with them. We work with the Edgehill Community Garden, so providing supports to them, different places around town. So I think it is very important for people to understand that it's not like you just do this one job. I think it is all organizations collaborating together, students like at Belmont or other places around town getting more involved with the community, like through volunteering, learning more about it, like what y'all are doing now. I think that's awesome that y'all are learning more about what's actually happening in your neighborhood, and that could apply to any school. Like Fisk could do more research about North Nashville or anything, you know. And then, yeah, definitely government help would be great, but that's kind of a more difficult thing to achieve, I guess, when government leaders don't kind of fall into line with what the community actually needs. If they aren't fully aware of what the community needs, then they're not going to be implementing these legislations that need to go into place that would actually support the community. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I can't think of anything like specific, like what y'all could do, but things like volunteering, I think that's a great start for sure. And then if from there, if maybe that's something like you see your career in, then you can get the word out to more of your peers, or work towards a career in community, like uplifting the community. Yeah, definitely was not aware of this throughout my whole life. I definitely grew up privileged. I mean, my family wasn't like well off. We definitely, I would say lower middle class, but we got by. My parents supported us and made sure that we never needed anything. I mean, I remember as a kid like eating like butter sandwiches, but I was happy with it. So I was totally oblivious though. I mean, other than like going to school, I mean, I went to private school. That's another privilege. We would do canned good drives or stuff like that, and that was about the extent of what I knew. I was like, oh yeah, of course there's hungry people, but I didn't think about it being like people in my neighborhood. I actually went to school at Christ the King over on Belmont Avenue, so literally in this neighborhood, and had no idea about the struggles that this community has seen throughout the years, especially now with gentrification. It's definitely something I've learned more over time. You know, I went to university, so I feel like anytime anyone goes out to college, that's when you kind of, your mind expands. You learn more about the world, and you kind of are open up to new ideas and other ways of life, or, you know, finding out about causes that you may not have known before. So growing up, going to college, I definitely learned more about social issues then, but when it comes to actually this particular community and just the idea of food insecurity in general in the US, I learned so much since starting here. So I've been here almost 3 years, and I've learned more in the past 3 years than I have my whole life about food insecurity and about how that affects certain neighborhoods, especially people of color, Black, BIPOC people. That is like, it's all kind of tied together. So yeah, learned a lot. Yeah, I think it would be definitely sustainable for other communities. I don't know. I think since we're still relatively new, still working out our kinks, we would like to expand for sure, and that's definitely being talked about. But I think making sure our model is done right, and then seeing how that could be implemented in other places. Because right now we are partnered with Belmont, so we have supports that way, and that may not be something that's available in other communities. So it may just be the grocery store, because we do have, in addition to the grocery store, we have supports through Belmont with our programming side of things. So our customers also have access to cooking classes or therapy, counseling. We do health fairs, so like having Belmont come over and helping with different, I don't know, things in the health world, STD testing, dietitian stuff, like learning about, you know, more nutritional options and stuff like that. So I think it would be able to be implemented in other cities. It would just kind of depend on what their community looks like and what their needs are there. But there are food pantries all across the US, and I think it would be, I wouldn't say easy, but I think it would be doable for them to transition into kind of our kind of model, whereas instead of handing out like a pre-made box, which, don't get me wrong, is great because food assistance in any way can be great, but adding that next level of dignity of choice, I think, is definitely an option that anyone could do for sure.